Welcome to FieldLink. I'm your host, Bill Smith. On this episode, we travel to West Texas to catch up with cotton expert James Hill, then off to West Tennessee to visit with Dr. Michael Kenty as we break down the art and the science of cotton desiccation with a product called Flash. Then Jody Lawrence from Strategic Trading Partners discuss the latest in commodity reports. And welcome back to FieldLink. It's that time of year where the cotton crop is getting close to harvest, but there's a few critical steps that have to happen before we get that far. And joining us today on this episode of FieldLink, we have James Hill from Texas. James, welcome to FieldLink.
Yep, glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Bill.
James, tell us a little bit about home. Where did you grow up? And tell us a little bit about your role today at Helena.
So I'm a sales manager for Helena, 26 years in the business with Helena. My home is West Texas. We get about 13, 15 inches of rain a year, average rainfall, pretty dry, pretty droughty. A lot of cotton. I'd say 90% of the crop that we deal with in my geography is cotton.
So you're the cotton expert. So that's why we got you on here today to educate our listeners about this unique crop that really helps clothe a lot of the world for sure. Great. And also joining us here in the FieldLink studio is Michael Kenty. Dr. Michael Kenty, welcome to FieldLink.
Thank you, Bill. This is my 25th season with Helena. I've been in the business for 46 years. Since I've started, I've been working with cotton, 36 years. And I get to work the bulk of the cotton in the U.S., and I have international experience working in Australia on some projects. So I've seen a lot in my day.
Well, guys, I want to thank you for joining us today on this episode of FieldLink as we get cotton-wise. And James, let's talk a little bit about cotton. First off, we've got a lot of listeners that are, not totally familiar with how cotton's raised. Tell us some of the highlights of, how that crop's raised and what's so important about defoliation, which is a topic we're going to focus on today.
Yes, sir. So cotton's pretty unique, pretty hardy plant for the most part. We plant about 9-10 nodes. We start getting our first fruiting positions. Then we go up to bloom. The bloom is only white for one day. The blooms drop. That's a small, immature bulb, and we try to get that bulb to mature size where it has good length, good seed, and good quality. There's a lot of times we'll manage that crop, the maturity of that crop with PGRs, mepiquats, pentaborates, so on and so forth to help them mature and to help speed up that maturity and to set the stage for us to get the crop out earlier. I say earlier, to get it out early than expected to beat whether we have winter storms. We can get some hurricane rains up in West Texas, but nothing like the coastal bend in South Texas where they try to push their crop hard to speed up the maturity to get it out before hurricane season comes.
I think that's a really important point for the casual listener that's not familiar with cotton. It's really important to accelerate that growth early, and especially at the stage towards the end of its life, so to speak, so that we can avoid those environmental issues and take advantage of really when the weather's a little bit nicer, correct?
That's correct. And defoliation, like we're talking about today, it works really well when the temperatures are warmer temperatures. It helps the desiccation. The defoliation helps speed up everything in that process to get that cotton out to where we miss the moisture. If you get rain on open cotton, the lint will stain. I saw pictures last week from situations in South Texas where they've got nothing but rain, but that seed will actually germinate in that lint. And that's really not good for the grower. It's hard to gin that cotton, so on and so forth. And the way they're grading cotton today is we really want a really pretty, white, good staple, decent mic, clean cotton, no leaf, no trash, no anything. And then they grade that on a scale, and the better the quality is, the more you're going to get for it.
Yeah, and that's what the goal is, obviously, is to deliver that kind of a crop where we can maximize profits. And taking some critical steps to get there is always important. A great fertility program, good fungicide program, managing insects. And today we're talking about defoliation. So I'm going to pivot a little bit to Dr. Michael Kenty. Let's talk about defoliation. Why is defoliation so important? You know, James talked a little bit about it. We got to have a clean cotton boll at the end of the day. But how do we get there?
The reason we defoliate now, as compared to when cotton first came around, we got mechanical pickers, mechanical strippers, and it's all done by machine. It's multiple acres a day, and we don't need foliage on there because it's, like he said, trash staining, and it's of all the things we do in cotton, from picking the variety, fertility, and everything. Defoliation, we can have all the science, but really it's an art, because I may be a salesman and I'll do a certain recipe on one guy, and the guy right next to him with a different variety may be totally different recipe. And it's you kind of got to know a lot of things that are going on. You determine when to defoliate based on, there are 4 ways you can do it. The old, probably most dominant way that a lot of people do is percent open bolls. And I've never liked that because the human eye is hard to predict exactly what's the percent. Cut bowl is good, where they've got a chart that you can cut and you tell where you are on maturity. The one that's most accurate is node above crack bowl. You count, you got 5 nodes above the crack bowl. If there's 4 or less, it's time to pull the trigger. Mm-hmm. If it's 5 or more, you're too early. But really the best, and I don't know how many people do it, is, and I did it when I was doing research on it, I would do node above crack bowl plus a cut bowl. The cut bowl was like, if I thought it was, I'd do the cut bowl as a check. And depending on the growth type you're looking at, the fertility that's been put into it, the amount of moisture will dictate how much of each of the components you will use.
Okay. And definitely it's an art and science is what you're suggesting. So, James, you're kind of our cotton expert in West Texas. There's a lot of different equipment and technology out there, and terms get thrown around pretty loosely. For the novice that's not familiar with cotton, can you tell us what the difference is between a cotton picker and a cotton stripper?
Yes, sir, Bill. A cotton picker will go through the field, and it will only pick the lint out of the bolls. A cotton stripper will literally strip everything off that plant, boll, lint, everything. So really in our market, you really need a cleaner plant, less leaf, because that stripper is going to come in there and grab everything that's left on that plant. For us, when we use flash, we typically have a cleaner plant, and that way we have less leaf trash going in the gin. And when you have less leaf trash, for us to have to do a second defoliation shot, a burn shot, we have to paraquat that cotton before a stripper can go in there. There's less foliage out there for that paraquat to have to burn, so we typically get a better burn on our second time after using flash as well.
When I started in the business, it was pretty much all strippers out west, pickers in the Delta and along the coast and the East Coast. There seems to be, especially where James is living in West Oklahoma, it depends on the grower and depends on the varieties he's growing, because they have stripper varieties, they have picker varieties, and it just depends on what they're comfortable with. But in a typical picker environment, if you get that recipe just right and you incorporate flash, it can be one and done. And for these guys over here, they want to be one and done. They don't want to have to go back and spray because they got switches or something happened that they can't control from the environment. And it's they get better at it each year, I think.
Well, I think the take-home point here is there's lots of agronomic practices out there, lots of different equipment, and it's different from geography to geography and really from farmer to farmer. So, James, tell us a little bit. There's a lot of products on the market to help in this defoliation process. What's one that you recommend?
So I got started with flash probably 10, 11 years ago, and we've really found a niche with that product. It's a special formulated ethopon that really helps some synergism and some performance of other defoliants that we use for tank mixes. We've seen a 3 to 7 day increase in when we can pull the trigger to either pick it or come in with a second shot to desiccate so we can get our cotton strippers in the field.
Flash gives a 3 to 7 day advantage over some competitive brands out there?
So, to Mr. Kenty's point earlier, is it's an art. And once you find that art and what is really looking good, and it can even be variety specific, Bill, but once you find that art early in the game, then you kind of just stick with your mix and you go with it. I've never ran Flash to where I didn't say, well, we can't continue to do that. It just has a synergy with other defoliants that's, to me, is unexplainable. I can't explain it.
And that synergy effect, like you talk about, James, that's huge. When growers can really start to get their cotton pickers in there 3 to 7 days ahead of other products, that could be huge for a producer.
Yes, sir. You get better leaf drop. You get a little cleaner field. We're beating the weather. We're beating the winter storms. Yeah, it's a big product for us.
Dr. Kenty, tell us a little bit about Flash. What are some technical things that make it really, I guess, unique to the marketplace?
When we introduced Flash, like I think James said 10 or 11 years ago, it was a struggle because Ethylene has been around forever, and people say, how do you reinvent the mousetrap? But one thing that Ethylene has got to have to do its job, it's got to be acidified. Because if you just did a straight ethylene, dropped it in a spray tank, and you had a high pH water, it starts breaking down immediately, converting to ethylene gas. You want that reaction to happen in the plant. You want ethylene production to happen in the cotton plant to abscess the leaves. They'll fall off. It'll make the bolls split open. And Flash has a component in it that keeps it acidified. Now, there's not enough acidification to carry tank mix partners, but for itself, it is protected, and it is way better than anything else on the market.
James, let's jump back to defoliation a little bit. Timing is everything in anything that we do in agriculture, but timing to maximize the yield and quality for a cotton crop is also critical, but timing that defoliation process is important. What are some possible issues with defoliation if we go too early or if we go too late?
If we go too early, Bill, you can freeze some bolls. There may be some immatures at the top that will that eventually will just kick off. So you take the risk of losing some length there. That plant actually produces its own ethylene to where it starts to form that abscission layer on that leaf and starts cracking the bolls open. If you hit that plant too early and that plant hasn't had the ability to start producing its own ethylene or amounts to where you can really enhance the defoliation with adding a Flash or ethylene or finish or whatever, you can not get near the leaf drop either.
So, James, with your experience then, trying to pick the right timing, what are some signs that you look for to identify this is the time to go and apply?
Yeah, so I look for speckling on the larger mature bolls. I do the 60% open cotton. I count the nodes above cracked bow. But for me, when I did most of my deal, I cut a lot of bolls, and I made sure that seed inside that bowl was mature. I've actually sprayed some cotton that was 40% open, had speckled bolls on it, and you cut those top bolls and it had mature seed on it. Even though rule of thumb says it needs to be 60% or better, we went ahead and hit those fields and had no issue whatsoever, opening bowls, dropping leaves, and we got the cotton out before weather set in.
And that's obviously huge. To a grower that's farming a fair amount of acres of cotton, if you can get ahead of the game, I guess the weather game in this case, by 3 to 7 days in some cases. There's a lot of imitators, guys, out there in the market. And we talked a little bit about Flash being a pretty darn good product that's proven. It's got a good reputation. And James, as you mentioned, it's got some proven results in your market in West Texas. What other kind of imitators are out there, and how does Flash compare to some of them?
Bill, I'm not familiar with the other imitators out there. We actually use Flash, to get this product started. It was a little bit of a challenge. We would have a lot of guys run a quart of ethylene or run a pint of finish or sometimes even a quart of finish. And just to get the product started and get it promoted, we would just tell the grower, all right, take out half your regular rate of ethylene and put that much flash in there with it. And there's a synergism when we mix the two, whether it's flash or whether it's finish or ethylene, that not only are we saving the grower a few dollars an acre by tank mixing, we're getting phenomenal, faster results. You can go out there typically 3 to 4 days after, and you just start seeing leaves on the ground, big green leaves that was attached to the plant.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point, James. There's lots of ways to save a buck, and in this case, you have a solution that can maybe save that grower a few dollars, but also provide more value of getting out there quicker and taking advantage of the timing.
Yeah, we'd have guys run 3 to 4 pints of ethylene, and we got them to cut to 1 pint of ethylene and either add a pint or a quart of flash to his tank mix. And he typically can cut his other defoliants with it, whether it be a Folex or AIM, just because we're getting a better leaf drop when we mix the two together. So, but timing's key when you do that as well.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about that timing, Dr. Kenty. You've got a lot of experience with flash. Some tips and tricks with timing. We heard from James. Do you have some other ideas?
My best recommendation to the reps in the area, and James has heard me say this, find the first field in your market that is 60% or better ready to go. And when you don't know, do you need a pint of flash? Do you need a quarter flash? You're going to do flash alone, or you're going to do combinations, to do a small plot test and then let the growers pick it. And we've been doing these little defoliation tests now for, 7 or 8 years. And we invite the growers, we give them a little notepad. There's a big number. This is treatment 1, treatment 2. And without any deviation, the growers usually pick what I would pick for the best one. It's usually like James mentioned, a pint of flash, or 24 ounces up to a quart, but usually it's a pint of flash, a pint of ethylene or finish, and maybe or maybe not a pint of a Bolex or something like that. And what's surprising is how consistent the growers are. And they kind of wander up and down, and then they all go there, and we gather around, we tell them what's in it, what it does, and then the game is over. They're just ready to go. And they just sit ready for their fields to start, and there's no more guessing what are we going to do. And over the years, if something changes, and it's more in the deltas when you got these hurricanes that come through late season, you'll have to change what you were doing because you get what's called, you may defoliate, and then it sets in raining, and the seed doesn't sprout in the bowls like it's doing in South Texas now, but they'll get what's called a switch. The cotton plant, hadn't mentioned this, is a tree. It's a perennial plant that we treat as an annual, and it gets more moisture and the temperature's warm, it'll send off a stalk at the top. So we have to go back and do a killing shot with or without some ethylene to continue to open the bowls. And that's about the only time it changes, and it kind of comes in cycles, about every 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. Like where James lives, they can bank on a bad drought. We can bank on a bad hurricane season.
Yeah, especially in the Delta and really, through the southeast U.S. and up the coastline. Cotton's grown, really a lot of states across the United States, from California, Arizona. So all have different experiences, but all, from what I understand, are having great success with flash.
It cycles on use the way cotton acres. If the cotton acres are up, we use a lot of flash.
Sure.
If the global market's kind of done something, the cotton acres is a little depressed, the sales go down a little bit. But if you look at the percent acres treated, it's consistently growing a little each year. It was a rapid growth, and then it's kind of plateaued like almost every product does in its life cycle.
Flash has been around. We talked about it. It's been 10, 11 years. Like a lot of products, the first year it came out, we had a few hiccups. We're still learning a lot about that product, but you quickly quickly learned how to manage that product. What were some of the challenges early on, James, that you dealt with, and how did you overcome them?
So the challenges early on is Flash is a great tank mix partner with other defoliants. And to go alone with Flash in the tank, I feel like you're going to be very disappointed. So we overcome that by finding the right mix, the right mixtures. We learned a little bit about cotton variety. Some cotton varieties are harder to defoliate than others. We learned pretty quick which ones open up and which ones don't. But yeah, it's back to the art. But we typically, to Michael Kenty's point earlier, we started doing defoliation plots, and we label them 1, 2, all the way to 10 typically. And we give the farmer a little notebook, and he walks through them, and he tells us which one he likes better. We let all the farmers go through there. 99% of them would pick, 100% of them would always pick the trial that had Flash in it. Now, one may have TDZ and one may have Folex in it, but that's kind of a farmer's preference, whether he picks or strips too, right? So, but 100% of the time that farmer picked Flash in that trial that had other defoliants mixed with it.
Yeah, and I think that's a great example how products evolve over time, and it's like anything. You learn, if you get a new car, you learn how to really drive that car after you've had it for a while. Flash is no different, and now that it's been in our portfolio for a decade now, nearly, you guys in West Texas and as well as other Helena reps throughout the country have really mastered how to utilize Flash in your local market.
Yes, sir.
One thing that I've noticed, and my role is different than James. He's a sales manager, and I'm more of the technical support. There are two emotional decisions when it comes to growing a cotton crop. First one, which is critical, and it causes a lot of growers anguish, is the choice of the variety. Once you get that done and you're clicking along and growing, the second emotional decision is, am I going to defoliate right? Because the grower knows if he doesn't make the right choice, the Helena rep doesn't tell him, please use Flash, do this, he's going to be disappointed. And so you got the beginning of the season and the end of the season can be very emotional for a cotton grower.
Yeah, and that's why it's really important for growers to have a good relationship with their Helena representatives, to walk them through the process to pick the right variety of cotton, and then really shepherd that process at the end. When is it time to defoliate for their farm, their field, and their acre? James, tell us a little bit about growers that you're working with today. As we, enter the harvest time, we're getting close in 24 crop. Talking about defoliation, what's the chatter out there? How do you position Flash to those growers in these tighter times?
It's about getting the crop out early. When that boll is open, it loses its weight every day. And then it also starts losing its grade as well every day. So every day that boll is open, you're losing money. So yeah, just talking about what you can lose. So where I live, to sell a grower is we typically September, October, November, that's when we get our moisture that builds our profile to go into next year. And that's our typical harvest time. So just to sell a grower on 3 days is big out here, because they could be out of the field for 7 or 10. And then even the rain hurts that lint just as well. So just getting it out, getting it in the gin, getting it on the market, and then selling when you want, or you may can hit the market just right. But if it's not on the market to sell, you don't have that option to either get a better price or to weigh your odds on selling it.
James, as I sit back and listen to you talk about Flash, it's really allowing that grower to take more control and give them more flexibility to manage their crop for both quality as well as yield.
That's correct.
Well, guys, I want to thank you all for joining us here on this episode of FieldLink as we learn about defoliation in cotton crops and a product called Flash that can help cotton producers across the country this year.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Welcome to Helena's podcast. This is Jody Lawrence, and with my co-host today, Brady Lawrence. Bill Smith is on assignment elsewhere and on a plane. So Brady and I are going to hop in here today and give a quick overview of what's going on and what we expect to see for the last couple weeks of August. Brady, welcome to FieldLink.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be on. Glad I get to kind of interview you sitting on the other side where I'm usually learning from you, but it'll be good to do it this way. Any new developments in the market or any updates since last week's USDA report? We saw the US corn yield stated at 183.1 bushels per acre and soybeans at 53.2. Anything since then with the Pro Farmer Tour this week or anything going on?
Well, the biggest thing that we are seeing, and it developed since last Friday, because last Friday we saw a new contract low in December corn and beans testing the old lows with December futures prices solidly under $4 and November bean prices now under $10, that a hotter and drier outlook into the end of August for a majority of the corn belt certainly caught everybody's attention, because on today's Monday the 19th, and beans were up 20 and corn was up 7 or 8 depending on the contract. So a little bit of weather premium is being added back into the market, which is good to see. And we've had a solid string of both flash sales, last Thursday's weekly export report, and the Monday export inspections are showing that we're running well ahead of last year and a little bit ahead of what the USDA is projecting. So we're optimistic that there are a few things developing, because we've seen the U.S. crop have some finishing trouble over the several times over the last 10 years. So if we can trim off a few of those bushels and get final yield at no higher than 183 and beans no higher than 53, then we can start to build a base and just see where the final yields come out when the combines start to roll.
Let's pick apart a couple of things that you said there. The weather forecast heading into the end of August. Is that kind of the main market mover that we should expect up until South America gets planting next month?
Yeah, I think it has to be, because one of the things the Pro Farmer Tour, crop tour, does start today and it'll conclude on Thursday. Their yields and their social media posts will be coming out all week. So they'll be interesting to follow, just simply to see what they're confirming, what the USDA told us in last Monday's report, and if there's some pockets in there that maybe the yields aren't quite as spectacular. But certainly finishing weather is going to be a big part, because beans still need to finish their process. Corn needs to continue to fill. And one of the things that I have been asked a lot about is what are the odds of an early freeze this year, because that would have a great impact on it. But an early freeze, we haven't seen one that we could remember in over 20 years. So it's a very low likelihood that we see something other than just hot, dry weather that could trim these yields. But speaking of hot and dry, South America, Brazil in particular, their major bean producing areas saw the driest winter in nearly 20 years. So their bean planting, or their early season corn and bean planting, will be delayed because of a lack of subsoil moisture. So that's certainly something to keep an eye on as we go through this La Nina, El Nino transition that appears to be on the horizon for the late fall and winter.
All right, that's all good. Something that you also mentioned was exports being a little bit ahead of maybe where the USDA thought, but also China being one of our major buyers. If they think they're going to have some issues in South America potentially, how does that kind of set us up to where if we see more flash sales along with consistent buying, can we start feeling a little more confident that the demand is there that kind of has been lacking recently?
The reports are indicating that China, regardless of what they're telling everyone about where their harvest is, that they have lost production this year, that their harvest is going to be lower in their major corn areas. And what we know about China is that they always love a good deal. And over the past 10 days, when corn and bean prices have both been drifting lower and making new contract lows, China has showed up as a very willing buyer at these levels where they view it as a discount. And certainly they can't count on South America's production, just like they can't count on ours when you're heading into a new season. So there's some opportunistic buying here, and there's also some peace of mind buying so that their bins are full in case this drought does become protracted in Brazil.
And speaking of bins being full, what are you hearing about basis? Is people starting to get rid of some old crop to make room for this, what could be another record crop this year? And what could we expect with basis as we head towards harvest of this year?
Well, unfortunately, the corn market this year never really gave us the opportunities that we are accustomed to seeing because the high tick for December corn and for November beans was both made on the first day of trade within the first 30 seconds of the yearly action on January 2nd when we reopened after the holiday. So the normal whatever's spring wet planting delays or a summer dry hot period that normally has given us opportunity just didn't present itself this year. So we've got a lot of people with a lot of old crop corn, and unfortunately those bins are going to need to be used for this fall's harvest and what looks like it's going to be another record harvest. So some of the opportunities that we are seeing is that the market is really asking you to hold your bushels on farm as long as possible. There's some really outstanding carries in the market when you go out into the December delivery dates and even into January, February, March of 25. And while it's hard if you have no bin storage space at all to take advantage of this, it is something that if you are wanting to price some old crop, talk to your elevators, talk to your buyers, and see how much free storage they will give you if you do a hedge to arrive contract. At any price that you like, say out for January, February delivery, and just try to work all the angles because this year is going to be one of the more difficult ones that we can remember. That because it's first time in many years where we've had back-to-back record harvests with a lot of corn to be delivered between first notice day for September futures all the way through first notice day through December and harvest.
Unfortunately, when prices aren't great, you have to make tough decisions, but also you have to work with what you got. It's not always rainbows and unicorns and prices around here. But last time I was on, we covered cotton a little bit. So, Jody, if you don't mind, I'll just give kind of a quick update on that. Last week, the USDA updated their estimates with lower acreage, lower production, exports, and ending stocks. I think the U.S. production this year is about 15.1 million bales is what they came out with, which was actually down 1.9 million bales from the July report when people were talking 17, 18 million bale potential. Funds like corn and beans are short a lot of contracts. Last I saw they were short about 50,000 contracts in the cotton futures market. And the main story is still lack of global demand. Exports were also lowered in that report due to a smaller production, but also just world export demand is not there. Some things that could be helpful, as you talked about, weakening U.S. dollar that could help all exports, and if the Fed begins to cut, you could see the weakness in the dollar continue, maybe even get back below that, whatever, if you want to call it $1 or 100 mark. And then, as always, cotton remains volatile. We're still in the middle of hurricane season. All it takes is one big one at the wrong time to do quite a bit of damage. So, as always, make sure you have a risk management plan and be ready to act on it if you need to.
All right, Brady, that's all good information for our cotton growers out there. Nothing else to tie up at this point, so we appreciate everybody joining us this time. Brady, thanks for filling in for Bill, and hope to have you back soon.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of FieldLink. Be sure to contact your Helena representative to see if Flash and one of Helena's premium adjuvants is right for your farm. Be sure to tell your friends about the FieldLink podcast and subscribe today wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode.